This is the second question for the exam from the Greek world coming up this Friday. This is the section concerning humanism in the Archaic Age, the extent to which it's noticeably present there. This is just a quote from Protagoras, "Man is the measure of all things," a famous quote from a later period, the classical era. So the best thing would be to just re-watch Nigel Spivey's How Art Made the World, especially what he has to say about the kouros, and these boy statues, in comparison to, say, Egyptian sculpture. So you can make a reasonable comparison. But briefly, you can see the development. That's what I told you on Monday. Between these very, very large, larger than life-size statues in the museum at Delphi that are recognizably human, but the anatomy is not that correct. It's rather schematic, I think I said. Whereas within, say, 50 years or so, they're producing statues more like this, where all of the anatomy is more or less where it ought to be. So that's there's a period of development towards statuary that looks more human. Crydian boy, that's mentioned in the video by Nigel Spivey. We talked about this. Remember the head that was found later. This smaller than life-size, about half-size statue has been called by some art critics the first beautiful statue in Western culture. You can see, allegedly, this is Hillary Clinton admiring the Crydian boy's backside. So that's what they mean by it is so lifelike that it sort of mimics reality. You can't get a really good sense of the beauty of a statue, how well it's executed. I mean, not the human part. From a photograph, it's very difficult to see it because it's three-dimensional. But you can get some idea from these photographs. Then this is beyond our period, but mentioned by Spivey, the Riace bronzes from Italy, found offshore in a shipwreck. Bronze statues of these, he claims, not exactly human poses, slightly exaggerated, subtly exaggerated. You could mention that if you want to, but it's not strictly necessary. They are nice, though. A second aspect of archaic humanism is the way it represents human beings in not particularly a savage way, but in a humane situation, where the famous story where Achilles is killing Penthesilea, the Amazon queen, and as he's doing that, notices that she's quite beautiful. It's another one. This sort of scene comes straight out of Homer, who is constantly juxtaposing scenes of everyday life, normal life, with the war. Okay, all of the similes in Homer's Iliad, all the similes come from everyday life, from the natural world, from domestic life, okay, to illustrate things that are going on in the war. And so here we have more of this kind of thing. You should be the judge of whether this constitutes humanism or not. In poetry, we have poems like this one, where Archilochus says he doesn't like the big-time generals who are much taller and better looking than everyone else. He sort of likes the ordinary-looking, even ugly-looking soldiers. And remember in the Iliad that Thersites, I'll write his name here for you, was the only ugly man at Troy. All the other heroes are, of course, beautiful. A second poem by Archilochus throws away his shield. He says, "Who cares? I'll buy a better one." Okay? So you can contrast that yourself with the epic and even the Spartan values that we talked about as well, although it's not strictly part of the exam. It does compare well with this point. The Spartan attitude towards leaving your shield on the battlefield to escape alive. Sappho, the second of these poets, both lyric poets, that is, poets speaking in propria persona, that is, in their own voice. So Sappho admiring the beauty of a bride from the point of view of her own desire for her. Okay? So we went over this. You can see it for yourself. Compares soldiers, that is the métier, the subject matter of epic, with beauty, sort of the source of epic, Helen's beauty, Helen's disdain for marriage when in the throes of love, sort of a Sappho situation. But comparing here an individual woman, a woman, mind you, naming her by name, and describing her as more beautiful than armor and chariots and so forth and so on. So an individual name, naming a woman, and we think coming from an actual social convention, how you presented a wedding feast. Okay. So praise for the bride. So another of these snippets from a wedding song about the presumably a girl who was late to marry, not because she wasn't desirable to the apple pickers, so to speak, but that she was so high up, that is, she was so refined that they couldn't reach her. In philosophy, we have as an example Xenophanes, who you'll notice here is not disbelieving of the gods, as it's sometimes represented. He does believe in gods. He believes in a sort of henotheistic, we don't really call this monotheism, henotheism, that God is a singularity, a unity, not an individual God, but a sort of a unity, all gods are one. Okay? But he says this anthropomorphism that the Greeks exhibit in displaying gods, worshipping gods, is wrong, he says, because everyone just makes gods to look like themselves. If cattle or lions had hands, they'd make gods that looked like them. Okay. This next to last point I want you to consider is Aristotle's statement about where tyrants come from. So, writing in the 4th century, that is around the time of Alexander the Great, about 150 years after the end of the period we're discussing now, he says, in olden times, whenever the same man became both leader of the people and general, they used to change the constitution to a tyranny. For almost the largest number of tyrants in the early days have risen from being leaders of the people. Okay. So, what seems on the face of it, at least according to Aristotle here, to be the height of individual upper class hubris, one person's agenda taking prominence over everything else, seems to be, in some cases at least, quite the opposite. That he only can do so, he can only stand up to the oligarchy by having the support of the lower classes, including the hoplite class, which were not, as we discussed, not poor by any means, but not as rich as the oligarchs, not the 1%, so to speak. And finally, as you were going out, I tried to make this point, I'll make it again now. The Panhellenic games are often cited as a typical archaic feature because it was something that all Greeks shared in. There are a couple other things about this that have to do with humanism, possibly. I'll leave it to you to judge. In your essays, there were lists of victors, number one, and their names and their place of origins were listed, and the year that they won, and the event that they won in. Okay? Later on, there would be odes. Ode just means a song in Greek. A victory ode that would be commissioned for somebody's victory to further immortalize it. One of the first that we have passed down to us, the first name is Coroebus in Greek, from Elis, all from the Peloponnesos. Remember Peloponnesos? He won the Stadion race, which I described to you, this running race, in 776, the first year of recorded Olympic Games. We also happen to know that he was a cook. We also know that other early Olympic winners were also not nobility. They were ordinary people, carpenters, and so forth and so on. Okay. That's all for that question. I guess if I were weighting the two questions, this one should be a little bit shorter. Put less emphasis on it. If you can find extra material in the book, that would be very good. But otherwise, don't just address these questions here, and that should be sufficient. Okay. I've already given you 2 class periods on the map, so I don't think I'll do any more with that with these videos. So that's all for now. Good luck on Friday.